Good evening. My name is Varun Nakor, Executive Director of AAPI Progressive Action. And on behalf of our organization and the 2020 Project, it's my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce the panel this evening, starting with our moderator. We are 12 days out from the most momentous election in modern day history. This panel could not come at a better time and essentially be a generational conversation of youth and non-youth to have a dialogue about what it's going to take to engage our community in that last extra mile. So with that, I wanted to introduce our moderator for this evening, sometimes known as Hudson Yang's dad, but certainly a notable figure in his own right if you follow any of his social media feeds or his commentary on CNN. So with that, I wanted to introduce Jeff Yang.
Thank you so much for that terrific introduction. I am, in fact, a father of several, one of whom is Hudson Yang, and a writer and a journalist and somebody who has a lot invested, as all of you should be, in the outcome of this election. This is, as Varun has mentioned, a momentous occasion, a pivotal moment for America, and I think especially so for Asian Americans. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the other panelists who will be engaging here in a conversation around what makes this election so momentous and why it is that each of us should be coming out and voting and encouraging others to do the same. Somebody was already mentioned in my introduction. That would be my son, Hudson Yang, the 16, soon to be 17-year-old actor best known for playing Eddie in Fresh Off the Boat. Hey, Hudson. You're literally, I can see you. You're. I would also love to bring in somebody who, as I do, represents the other side of the youth generation, as it were. The not youths, I think Varun had mentioned, and that would be Sakina Jaffrey, who you know perhaps as Chief of Staff Lena Vasquez from House of Cards, but I know as somebody who is just a brilliant person. We have had the great pleasure of speaking with her on panels like this before, and Sakina, eternally young to me.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I didn't want to be in the non-youth group or whatever. I'll take it.
That is what we are.
I'm not, so it's okay.
No, the adults. Let's just say the adults in the room.
The adults in the room.
So with that, I'd like to introduce the fourth member of our panel, let's say a new adult in the room, and that would be Ashley Liao, who you may know from Fuller House, from a notable guest appearance on Fresh Off the Boat, as well as on the new Disney Plus movie, The Secret Society of Second-Born Royals. And Ashley, when I mentioned that you are a new adult in the room, it's because you literally just turned 18 this year, right?
19 yesterday. 19. But yeah, I've been an adult for a year now, which is crazy. Yeah.
Wait, yesterday was your birthday?
Yesterday was my birthday. I turned 19 yesterday. I'm an adult in Canada. I know. Not much has changed. I had a debate with my friends that 19 is the most, boring of the teenage years, and I'm excited to be in it.
Well, welcome to this side.
Thank you.
Hudson,
are you calling her
also
old? That's
older. Let's just say older. So that all said, what we want to talk about, of course, is the topic of voting, and it is something I think that's particularly critical when we talk about our community and generations, because the way that our community is often divided isn't just by age, but also by nativity, by generations of people who are immigrants, who have become American by choice, and those who are born here and who are fortunate enough to have inherited this American franchise. And I just wanted to throw out there that question first, that about your first voting experiences and those of people around you, and maybe to share a little bit of what voting means to you, especially as we do, coming from a largely immigrant community. Sakina, I'd like to throw it to you first to talk about your first voting experience.
My first voting experience was for Jimmy Carter. I was 18 years old. I was the youngest of three daughters, and we all voted at the same time because obviously it's 4 years before the one previous. And it was very exciting. I did it in my elementary school lunchroom, which felt kind of, fitting. And I took it very seriously. Like I just felt empowered by it, which is interesting because my mother hadn't become a citizen yet. She'd come from India. And I grew up with a Black stepfather who was so disenfranchised from voting and thought it's never going to change for us, but it's never going to change for the Black man, and actually didn't vote in my lifetime until Obama was elected. So it's kind of profound. And my mother voted then. She had become a citizen. So in the life, I watched somebody not vote, and I had gone to a private school with all girls school where they taught us this is a huge right. This is democracy working, and I felt really proud when I was able to go and vote.
That is amazing. I mean, I think especially the story of your stepfather and your mother, and the decision to vote in part because of representation, right? Because I have no doubt whatsoever that your stepfather was motivated because he saw for the first time somebody who didn't just offer a plan, but offered a plan from a recognizable face.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think a lot of, from what I understand, a lot of Asian Americans, young people feel like it's not going to change. Things aren't going to change. And they don't actually realize how important our having a democracy, which is the most important thing right now, that we have the possibility of actually democracy ending right now. That's why these votes are so important. And if you feel empowered by that, it's a great feeling to start to have and to hold in your heart and to proceed because you have the power.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for sharing it. I want to now turn to you, Ashley, to talk about your vote, but also perhaps a little bit more about your family. Of course, I know your mother, and she's awesome. I hear from what Sakina said that there's a sense in which voting kind of becomes a tradition. It's part of the culture that you grow up with. And I want to know a little bit more about how voting became a part of your own growing up process. And I can share a little of the same for Hudson.
So the first time that I voted was actually in the primaries back in March. So I didn't have to go in. I went into the voting booth and I didn't have to wear a mask because we didn't know about, coronavirus and everything back then. It was like right before that kind of just end of the world apocalypse feeling a day, and so I went in. I spent a good 5 minutes deciding who to vote for because I was torn between two candidates, and I made my choice and I was very happy with it. And then as for voting in my life, voting hasn't really been a very big part of my life, I would say, for my childhood. I remember that in school we would hold mock elections. And so Hudson, you probably went through that whole thing of like, you'd sit in class and be like, if you could vote for someone, who would it be? And we didn't know anything about policy or politics. And so, in my family, politics was never a really big thing until I came out of the womb and was like, hey, I'm going to disrupt everything that you know about economics and policy making. And I'm going to make you think a bit. And my poor parents, But I think that voting is really important this year because for the first time, my mom and I got to vote together. And so even though we couldn't, go to a polling place, we did drop off our ballots together. We do have a bit of, like a photo shoot there. We got excited. We did do a little happy dance after we voted. And we put our ballots into the official huge, ginormous box. And that was it. And we were really excited. And, I think for my mom, this is the first time that I've seen her be so excited about voting, because I remember as a kid, she'd be like, oh yeah, I went to the voting place and I voted, whatever. But for me as a kid, it was those stickers. I wanted an I voted sticker because I thought it was so cool. I was like, oh, that's so cool. You got to vote. You're an adult. And so I'm saving mine for November 3rd because I too would love to have the ability to just have little kids be like, you got to make a difference. You got to vote. Be like, yeah, you get to do it soon too. And so, yeah, that's a bit of my story with voting.
You're giving a little kid.
Oh, you can do it too.
I think Ashley did literally point upwards towards you. That's strange. Yeah.
100%.
No, you're on this side of my screen, not this side.
Oh, okay. You're
Well,
down here.
Nice.
So Hudson, I mean, there is a sense in which, because you're the youngest member of our panel and somebody who isn't actually old enough to vote yet, one would guess that it maybe feels a little distant to you, that voting doesn't seem as if it means quite as much. But in some ways, I think that may not be true. And one of the things we're definitely seeing is that people who are even 17 and younger are feeling very much like this election matters very significantly, because after all, the world that you guys live in right now is being directly defined by this voting, by the outcome of this election. Hudson, I mean, you know me, I'm not somebody who's been shy of politics as we've been growing up. What are some of the ways in which voting has kind of come into your life, and especially now in this time of Corona? What does voting look like from the standpoint of somebody who is not yet ready to vote?
Well, one thing that I would like to say is that I think this generation is the most informed generation. We have look at Ashley's like, for sure. We have
too informed. I have too much going on in my brain all at once.
Honestly, we have access to the entire world's information bank and the tip of our fingers. And so I think because of that, not only have we just been able to educate ourselves, be able to kind of keep in touch with what's going on around the world, we also, I think maybe it didn't happen before, but recently people are kind of being able to understand the politics behind what those politicians are saying. I've been noticing in my classes, in my Zoom classes, in the chat boxes when we're ever talking about anything political, there's just full-blown, debates going on about these policies. It's crazy. It gets really heated, and the teachers do not know what to do because teachers can't really make that standpoint. But I think from this side of the age range, from the 18 and under, I think this year's election is actually almost more important to them than to people who are older, because this is our future that we are creating and protecting. Even though we can't directly cast our ballots and cast our votes, I know that kids my age and kids maybe a little younger are doing the most they can to try to influence their parents or other adults around them. I had a student have a full argument with my teacher about voting for the right party. I mean, it's crazy how invested teenagers are these days. And I'm really impressed by some of my peers.
I feel like a lot of that happens because politics have become mainstream. If you weren't there watching the debate when a fly landed on Mike Pence's head, you aren't in the know, And so memes for our generation are an absolute must. It's how we spread information. It's how we cope. It's how, it's how information gets spread in a way that we will understand. And so I think that, like you said, it's important for our generation because a lot of our culture is built upon politics. Because that's things like that. People are like,
you also have young people like Zendaya and Kiki Palmer and who are influencers who are getting involved, right? And I feel like that is a whole untapped. In the past, that was a very untapped group of people. And I heard that. The DCCC was going to be doing a whole outreach to youth because it's just nobody realized how to capitalize on this. And this weird thing that happened with the coronavirus and everybody not being in school and the Black Lives Matter movement is suddenly all these young people were on the street. And all these young people were feeling the energy of making a difference and standing for something. One thing I love I have a 25-year-old and a 22-year-old. One thing I love about your generation is that you don't have patience. You don't.
That's so true.
It's a beautiful thing, and our generation. Or I'm younger than Jeff, but our generation was like, we will fight for as far as we can go. And you're like, no, not good enough. Absolutely not. It's the ability to settle is the most energizing thing that I can see. And when everybody had this odd, terrible moment with the coronavirus but making you not be able to go to school, not have your jobs, whatever, suddenly you felt the energy of other people. And I thought it was profound. And I think it actually made a huge difference in terms of, and also you had been isolated from your peers, right? And then suddenly you got to be on the street with this mission. And I feel like the same thrust, the same push is happening with this election. You're feeling your power, as you should.
And I think another thing too is that with the case of like coronavirus, people really got to see the effects of government on our everyday lives.
Oh,
how the decisions of one person or of one group of people can really change how an entire country lives their lives. So I think that also is a really big influence. And you know what? Maybe I will, go talk to my parents about making this decision or doing this or that or going to vote because, I mean, it's crazy how much power one man can have, even though America's designed to limit.
Or woman.
Or woman, men or women. You were right. Thank you.
Or woman.
Thank you for correcting me.
Or eventually non-binary, but
or non-binary.
Yeah.
Anyone. I mean, one person or human.
Let me
Yes, that's kind of not an
step in here.
alien. Not
I think
a dog.
covered all the bases.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let me step in here as the aged grandpa of this panel, the person
Way to
representing
age
the far
yourself,
end of
Jeff.
the
Good
spectrum.
job.
Don't worry, Dad. You don't look a day over 30.
Yeah, 300 maybe. Well,
Don't laugh
so
that hard.
Oh,
let's talk about what I think a number of you have mentioned so far, which is this notion of engaging older generations. And I say this because I literally just yesterday had an extended conversation with my parents, or my mom in particular, about this election, how important it is. And they are, Sakina, as you mentioned, they are immigrants. They're people who came to America and chose to come here, chose to become citizens, embraced voting early on because they didn't necessarily have that capacity to have free elections where they came from. And
they were from China and then went to Taiwan initially?
They were from Taiwan. They're long-time Taiwan. But Taiwan is obviously a place where democracy has taken a while to flourish as well. And I think the biggest thing that I think it has been important to me is that I've felt as an adult, and especially as an adult with kids now, freer to have those conversations with my parents, since now there are 2 voting generations, soon to be 3. And I will say it has really been remarkable to speak to them about issues from the standpoint of being, again, fellow informed adults throughout my adult life. Even though we don't agree on candidates or on issues very often, I think we're finally getting to be eye to eye on where we are today in this particular era. And that's something I want to toss out to to all of you, really, but Hudson and Ashley perhaps especially. There's actually a hashtag campaign out there right now that Daniel Day Kim is doing a great job amplifying, called Auntie Uncle Vote, right? And the goal here really is to engage people who may not be as tied into the process, may not be as necessarily informed in some ways, and also may have challenges, other kinds of challenges to vote. Linguistic, geographical, or obviously in the time of COVID, simply safely voting and knowing how to navigate, mail voting. So I want to toss out to you guys to share a little bit about your thoughts around how best to motivate, again, people on the other side of both the generational and perhaps immigrant divide, naturalized citizens, immigrant Americans who may not be as comfortable in this voting environment. What have you been saying to them, or what do you think should be done to encourage them?
I know that. Oh, you're gonna go ahead. No, she's taking a breath. All right. I know. For me, talking with my relatives, particularly my grandparents, has been a struggle a bit, mainly because I don't speak Mandarin. I don't speak Cantonese. I speak English only, and so I know that wanting to communicate kind of that desperation and that need to vote is difficult. But I know, particularly with my grandma on my mom's side, we talk a lot about politics is the thing, and so I'm the kind of person where I'm gonna be the one to disrupt Thanksgiving dinner because I'm like, hey, did you see what happened? And they're like, shh. And I'm like, no, it's important. We're all here. We're all gonna listen, and we're gonna talk about this. And they're like, we're trying to eat dinner, and I'm like, no. This is more important than dinner. And so I think the persistence of wanting to talk about issues that are affecting us right now are important, because not only is it going to affect the younger generation that is voting, but it's also affecting the older generation that's voting too, because they're still here, they're still voting because these measures will still affect them. And so I think when you make voting personal, that is when people start to realize, oh, I do have a say. I do have a say in what I do, and I can, make my voice heard by voting. So yeah, I mean, well, I don't know. Your original question was about getting your relatives to vote. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Hudson,
how have you gotten your dad to vote?
Okay, I don't do anything. My
Is it
dad,
hard? Is
we
it a
all know
struggle?
he's the most vocal person in the entire world. It's funny too, because I think the one thing is, if I ever decided not to vote or voted for the wrong candidate or whatever, my dad would disown me, and I'd be just alone. So it's too interesting because one thing is my grandparents are immigrants, and because of that, they also have their own differential views and political standpoints, and because of that, they the last year they almost voted for Donald Trump, and then
not last election, not last year.
Last election, sorry, yeah, I'm stupid. Last election, they tried almost voted for Donald, and then my dad literally just decided, he has his views, so he decided just not to let them go outside their house, and that happened, so they couldn't vote. But it's really interesting the conversation.
Well, they can vote. Here's the thing: that they can vote this year because they have mail-in ballots, and that if you're in California, it's a great way to not get exposed to coronavirus. Right.
But it's really interesting because the conversations that my dad had with my grandparents just kind of explained to them, the importance of making a decision and how it affects our countries. I think it's just, I don't know, it's strange.
I think with immigrants,
there's one very simple way to explain to our immigrant parents or our immigrant grandparents that this election is important, because, and I almost feel like crying when I say this, but the country that they came to, the land of opportunity, will not exist. So every single reason they chose America as their landing spot, because of what you could become, it won't be there. I mean, it's very simple. It's not, I'm not even being dramatic. We just will not have the democracy. And especially with this idea that anybody who comes from a different ethnic group than Donald Trump and his followers are lesser than. I mean, I think that's the simplest thing you can say. That's it. The country you came to will not exist.
I will say that. I will say that the first of all, just in case people are thinking that I somehow tied up my parents up. I didn't lock my parents up.
You definitely did that. You tied them up.
I did give them tickets to Taiwan.
Very nice. Very good.
But that all said, I think the thing that has really been most convincing for them, though, has in fact been the societal reaction led by some voices high up in government towards coronavirus. The sense that the racialization of this disease has really been a powerful way to motivate them to want to express their voice. Yeah. And those are some of the issues that I think we need to kind of bring out firmly in front of people as we try to encourage them to get out to the polls. I also want to raise this question around not just the why we vote, but the kind of where we vote, right? I mean, all of us. Well, Sakina, are you on the East Coast or are you here in Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Yeah. But presumably in a state that is very blue.
Yes.
California, woo.
California, absolutely. So there are people who say, hey, it doesn't really matter whether I vote, because this vote is going to, the state is going to have votes that go a certain way, regardless of whether I vote or who I vote for. And I will say that point, Sakina, that you made about democracy, voting for democracy, is particularly critical this election, because there's so much misinformation and disinformation about whether or not this process will work at all, that if we do not, in fact, come out in huge numbers, there's going to be that hanging question of whether or not this is a fair election, a full election. So we all need to vote, regardless where we are.
It's the same idea where people say, like, I'm not going to vote. What is one vote going to do? My vote won't change anything.
You know that there are precincts where Donald Trump won by 2 votes.
That's
there are areas. There are states, there are states where he won by, like, am I right, Jeff? Like 10,000.
Yes.
I mean, it's nuts. Every vote does count.
It's nutty. That's crazy.
Well, Sorry.
Oh,
Ashley.
yeah. No, I remember writing a paper about the Electoral College and how it works and why we use it and why people don't like it. And so I one of the top things that people talk about is, oh, it's just one vote. It's not going to matter. But yes, your one vote is going to add up to more than one vote because there are people that are on the fence. There are people that are undecided. I think it's important to do your research on policies and what you believe fits best for your life, but also the people around you and how you see humanity and how you see the direction that our country is going. So I think one of the things that I've asked people that are like, I'm on the fence, I don't know who to vote for, even if I should vote, I ask them, I'm like, so, when you look back on your life 4 years ago, is it better? Is it worse? Do you feel the same? Are you angry about certain topics? Have you learned about newer topics? Do you have opinions on things? And so one of the hardest things for me to vote on were propositions because they are so incredibly niche to where you are. I mean, even down to the county. So, for example, I live in Los Angeles. I don't live in Los Angeles County. I technically live in Los Angeles County, but I reside in Orange County because my parents are there. I still spend the majority of my time there. And so I look at these different propositions that are specific to Orange County, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're talking about where my tax dollars are going to go as someone who lives in Orange County. And so with things that are very niche and very, very small like that, your vote and your voice really, really do matter because it affects you directly. Not that voting for the president doesn't affect you directly, because it does and it will. But with things like, do you believe that we should put more money into that local school that you live right next to? It's things like that really are very important as well. Yeah.
I think that's one thing which we don't want to forget, that we are not only voting for president this year. We're voting for senators. We're voting for House of Representatives members. We're voting for city council members, judges, state electors, a whole range of things and initiatives, like you said, right? So regardless of what we do have a say, and it's essential for us to utilize that. I do want to call out some key states, though, where your vote actually just, as an Asian American, matters even more because there's both a concentrated. Let's just say it, right? So Texas, a state which is actually a battleground state this election. Georgia, also surprisingly a state where it's just on the precipice, and there's a high concentration of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Arizona, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, right, which has one of the largest Southeast Asian populations in America, and even North Carolina, right? So between North Carolina, Georgia, and Texas, you've got southern states that are actually in play this election. So it's critical. It's critical if you're in those states to turn out. It's critical to turn out regardless. But that whole question of whether you make a difference, you will make a difference in those states. There's no way you can't. So we have some questions, but we also have a couple things which I just want to share out and have you guys perhaps amplify thoughts on. There is so if you are under 18 and can't actually vote yet, are there things you can actually do still to help people who are over 18 votes? There are. You can work at the polls, and you get paid for poll working, and you do not need to be over 18 to do so. There's a resource. You can go to eac.gov/help-america-vote. It's particularly critical now, I think, especially for younger people to do so, because traditionally poll workers are older, and that's a very high-risk group. So we need younger people to come out and to maintain democracy directly by simply managing the process. And that also goes for poll watching. We need people to be there just to ensure that that people know what to do, that the instructions are clear, that if they need assistance in any way, especially have access to multiple languages, that you can provide that sort of democratic access to people who need it. So I mean, I don't know if any of you have share things to share about that sort of process of being an assistant to democracy, if you will.
I think you can also, young people can do phone banking for whomever they want, and they are encouraged to do so. It was so funny. My best friend's daughter was 16 and she wanted to get involved. So she was doing phone banking, but of course she uses a cell phone. So she's like, is this a busy signal? Like she literally did not really know how to, it's like when my kids had to mail something, they said, I'm not sure how to address an envelope. So
writing a check, all those
write a
things.
check. You can do phone banking. And also, if you have, Ashley, you seem incredibly well read about issues and politics.
Thank you.
You know things that maybe your friends on Instagram don't know. Share
yeah.
let them know what they are. I mean, I know some people are hesitant to do that, but just look at what's been really fascinating for me is Claudia Conway. Do you know who?
Yeah, her TikTok is just
she's very young. She's very young, and she's expressing her views. So you can express your views also.
Yeah, I think the most important thing that a youth can do is educate. It's the amount of information, the amount of power that information holds is immeasurable. You can do anything with just a little bit of knowledge. So I think that's the best thing that a child can do.
I want to note that we talk a lot about YouTube, we talk about Twitter, we talk about Facebook as key platforms for driving awareness and engagement with voting. But to your point, Sakina, TikTok is gigantic for the sort of Gen Z, incipient voter and new voter, and frankly, and this is one for Hudson, gamer platforms like Twitch, like Discord.
AOC.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah, did you guys actually track that?
Unbelievable.
AOC playing Among Us with Pokemon and
gosh, that was my favorite thing to watch because one of my favorite political streamers is Hassan. He is where I get my brain things from, and so just getting to watch that and knowing that they had 500,000 people at one time watching them play a game where, voting is the reason why you play the game. You play the game and you have to vote out the person who is the imposter. And so do we not have an election right now where you have to vote? Regardless of who you are voting for, you are having to vote. And so I think a game like that is great because it encourages you to be like, oh, something is not right or something is right. We need to vote this out, or we need to vote this in.
I think Ashley is sus.
So,
I don't know about you, Hudson.
I am not. Hudson is more sus than me. I have to say.
Vote her out. That's 2-1. Let's go.
No. Oh my gosh. I got ejected.
I've been electrical this whole time. I can't believe it.
Hudson vented, so
Too much inside baseball of the gamer side now. Okay, so back to the question of voting, and I want to throw things open now a little bit for us to talk about maybe some of the issues we brought up some already that you think are really driving people to vote or should be driving people to vote. We talked a little bit about coronavirus. We talked about some of the issues of racialization of the disease. But are there any things that are really very strongly on your minds, respectively, as being things that should just set a fire under people and get them more eager to vote this election than any before? I know, Ashley, you've got something to say.
Yeah, sorry. No, I know. You know that my brain is spinning as soon as you say, policy. I'm like, oh, there's so many. Where do I begin? But, speaking of today with what happened with, Amy Coney Barrett and her getting passed along and moving on to the next step to become or not become a Supreme Court justice, I think things like that are extremely important because we're not just talking about policies that could be made and could be put into action, but it's defending ones that have already been through the process. And so, for me, I think about Roe v. Wade, regardless of what side people are on. I think it's important to talk about how the Constitution is going to be interpreted. It's important to think about the measures that are going to be put in place that are going to affect your life personally. So whether it's, allowing people to marry who they want to marry, or if it's allowing Roe v. Wade to still be the law of the land. I think it's important with things like that when you're voting for the president, you're voting for the person who's going to confirm people that are going to uphold or destroy current laws that we have. And so that's something that's really on my mind when I think of things as a woman, as someone who, is Asian American. I think about things like that particularly. Yeah.
Sakina, how about yourself?
There's so many things. There's, climate change, there's Roe v. Wade there, but just the one thing that has been keeping me up at night, just a report on it recently, was that this administration has kidnapped and orphaned 545 children. Those children have been separated from their families, and the lasting psychological damage on those children is as profound as any kind of trauma. And I can't. It's just an administration that would allow that, would want that, would think that that is the way to punish immigrants. That's it.
Yeah.
I will do everything I possibly can to get rid of these people. And there are many other issues, obviously. That's what's been on my mind.
But as a parent, and obviously as somebody, it's impossible not to think of that.
As a human, it's like
As a human being, yeah.
It's a human being who doesn't even have. I mean, if I'm away from my dog for 2 weeks because I'm filming and I am like that sad over my pet, I can't imagine as a parent what it feels like knowing that your kid, who is you, what that must feel like. And so, yeah.
Well, Hudson, how about yourself? Do you have a pet issue, if you will, that will not an issue about pets, as Ashley mentioned?
My dog didn't pee today.
That really will kind of, you think drive people to the polls? What would that be?
I mean, I feel like those two kind of named it perfectly. I mean, some of the stuff I didn't even know about, like the orphaning children, that already has set a blaze in my heart. I wish I could vote this year, but I don't know. There's nothing else I really need to add. I'm just kind of appalled, actually.
I will say that, I'm wearing, a Hamilton shirt, immigrants to get the job done, right? I think that the thing that for me, and I think for our community, that underscores virtually everything we do, especially when we talk about democracy and the sort of the franchise of democracy, is that we take for granted the fact that people can come to this country and participate and become citizens, right? But we have been seeing over the last, let's say, 4 years, a series of processes, something like that, a series of processes in which people's right to come here has been denied, people's ability and freedom to even seek asylum here has been denied. And then the question of whether or not people should be allowed to naturalize, to become citizens, whether citizenship can be revoked. These are things that we're talking about in 2020, right?
Like DACA and Dreamers.
No one could have imagined that these would be questions, and they are. So with that, I'd like to throw open the doors a little bit to some of the questions that have come forward. And there are some really great ones out here. Sakina, I'm going to throw this one to you. There was a question here about topics like Black Lives Matter. And of course, you mentioned, people going out to the streets, younger people especially in this time. How can those issues be brought forward in a way that's effective, and that's moving, that's connected to older generations, especially to immigrants who may not be as really apprised of the racial dynamics of America?
Wow, I mean, it's a heavy topic because, I mean, much as we would like to not admit this, I know Indian Americans can be incredibly racist themselves. They have a whole color structure, and I cannot say that we are free of all the same issues that exist in this country, right? So I think it's hard. I mean, you have to basically show them that it affects their lives, because just as you might think that a Black life is so different from yours, right? Because you may be Korean American, Chinese American, you vote more, you are more educated, you generally more educated, but you have to let them see that the rights of their grandchildren and their children might be just as equally affected. I actually keep the Holocaust Memorial Twitter feed. I am a whatever it's called. It comes on my feed so that every day I can see what happened in the Holocaust, when people thought that, and they're pictures of people. And so you think you're safe, but you are not safe. Do not take for granted the fact that you are, whatever the words are, like the, industrious Asians or whatever, all the awful stereotypes, right? You are not safe. So that's all I would say, is nobody's safe.
I think the fact that the Holocaust is still something that we are having conversations about, that some people even question
Right.
today. So, it really underscores the
That
fact
kid
that
was a Holocaust denier. How about that? Right.
it's crazy that these are things, that history is not settled, right? Our history is not settled in this nation and in this world.
Right.
And that speaks now to another question that came up here, which relates to whether we can make a difference, whether we can, in effect, change history by changing the future. A young voter, this was raised by, again, a commenter, who voted for the first time in 2016, said they became disillusioned because the candidate they voted for won the popular vote but was not elected due to the Electoral College. I wonder which candidate that could be. What would you say to people who, in that election especially, felt like their vote didn't make a difference? And I'm going to toss that out to Hudson and Ashley first. What would you say to people who feel like just the process itself is sort of quote unquote rigged?
That is a tough question.
You have any? You want to?
You go for it. You
Okay. All right. I was watching today or yesterday a briefing about Homeland Security discussing how foreign interference is something that we have to deal with in our elections, unfortunately. And so one of the things that they made clear is that we will not allow and tolerate that kind of action within our elections. But if it is going to happen, and since it has happened before, it is important to vote in a manner that is safe. Make sure you're dropping off your ballots in a place that is, given to you by your county or by your state. Make sure that you sign your envelope, things like that. For me, I think it's hard when you vote. And, when we think about numbers, we think about voting. We're like, this person got more votes than the other person. Isn't this the way that it should be? Because ultimately, are the laws going to affect the people as well that didn't vote for that person? And so, I think of things like working on just the popular vote or working off of ranked choice voting. I think of other ways that, other countries have decided to start voting. But right now, what we have in this election is that we have the Electoral College. And so wherever you're at, it's necessary to go and vote and let your voice be heard, mainly because your voice still does matter. You may not feel like it does. Sometimes I feel like it doesn't matter, but there's something really rewarding about knowing that you did do your best, because if you don't vote, then your voice will not be heard, period. So at least if you are voting, you know that your voice is going to be heard through that vote that you're casting. Yeah.
I think also, as I said, you can't change anything unless you get in there and try to disrupt things, and you have no right to talk unless you vote. And I certainly believe that, like Ashley, when she gets her right to, when she votes, she's going to do the next thing and take more power and make a change. And like I think AOC and Obama both saying, you're just voting to be engaged in the conversation.
Yeah, 100%.
You cannot be engaged in the conversation. Yeah. So, your generation is so amazing that you guys won't settle. And if this system is not working for you, you will vote and you will change it. AOC, all of these young people will change it. So
I think even if you're feeling like your vote isn't going to count, the research that you do in learning about future measures already educates you so much. I mean, I wasn't much of a political person until 2016. I didn't know about these laws that were affecting me. And so, in the process of learning about these different ballot measures and learning about these different propositions and whatnot, I've become just more educated in general. And isn't that what we all want to be, is just knowing more about the world around us, and specifically in politics, because it really does affect you in your everyday life. And so, yeah.
Furthermore, I guess the point of his question was like, what can we say to kind of convince him to continue voting and, do his part? And it's almost like there's not a lot you can say, because that is kind of a stupid, messed up situation, right? But at the same time, if you take that, result, you're like, you know what? Okay, well, it didn't work this time, so I'm done. I'm not going to vote anymore. I'm just going to give up. All that's going to happen next time is that, maybe they won't even win they won't even win the election, the popular vote, and they'll definitely won't win the Electoral College. I mean, all you gotta do is persevere. I mean, perseverance is the key to everything.
Please do not rage quit democracy, folks.
Yeah,
This is not rage quit democracy.
yeah, don't rage quit democracy.
It would
That's
not be Pog if you raged quit
okay. Actually,
democracy.
stop. My spine.
That would be really Monka-esque
Stop,
if you.
stop.
Sorry, I'm trying to reach the gaming community right now. Okay.
No, not the
All right.
Side.
So I'm going to throw out one last question, and this one to Hudson. Actually, this is something that that had come up in the earlier conversation. Do we think that the voting age should be lowered? Like, do you feel, Hudson, that? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of discussion about it. Do you feel like you, as somebody who's 16 turning 17, should be able to vote this election?
Well, I think one of the main reasons why the age is kind of where it is right now is because the idea that people didn't think that kids who are 16, teenagers, are really educated enough to make a proper decision. They aren't adults yet, so they shouldn't be able to make the decision. They shouldn't have that right. But I think at the same time, I know a lot of children, quote unquote children who are way more educated than adults, that are just know more, or more, well mannered. And I think, I would say that, back then when kind of kids weren't really as, in touch, maybe, the age should be 18. But I think nowadays when, kids who are even 14, 13 years old to have, know more about politics than adults. I mean, maybe not 13, but at least if you can drive, you have the right to vote.
Right? Yeah.
you say
it's so important that basically what civic engagement is something which becomes a habit, and it's something where it's a muscle that you start to use when you're younger. And I think, whether or not the age is 16 or 18, if for some way, if our families have gotten us engaged early, then we think, oh, this is cool. This is my power. This can be my power. So, I mean, we don't have national service like that. That would help us maybe go out into the country and get to see other people, how they live and how we can affect each other. But I think if it's the civic engagement muscle, which is the one that'll power us through anything to say about democracy.
The one word that I do have about lowering the age of voting is it's kind of like the fact that when you turn 18, you are kind of legally considered an adult. So you can make your own decisions. You can, you move out. That's the whole stigma that you kind of, when you turn 18, you move out of the house and you're under the rule of your parents. I think the one word that I would have is when you turn 16 and you are, let's say you're allowed to vote, if your parents kind of steamroll you into making the decision they want you to make. If you want to vote for one party and they say, you know what? No, if you don't vote for that party, I will disown you.
You mean like parents who send their parents to Taiwan so they don't vote for something?
Exactly. That is the one word that I would have. So
I mean, I actually think just say I think 16 is too young. I know I've lived with a 16-year-old. I've lived with two 16-year-olds, but it's just the brain is still forming.
One of the things that I remember from my political science textbook is that if you as a parent bring your child to go vote with you, they have a higher chance of forming healthy voting habits.
Yeah.
And so as someone whose parents didn't bring them, that doesn't mean that there is not hope. And so I think one of the things
just an anomaly.
Go with your friends,
throwing their parents
right?
under the voting bus.
No, I'm not. Mom,
Yes.
Dad, you guys are great. They do vote in every single general election, though. I do have to say, I'm very proud of them.
Yeah, that's great.
But as a kid, that wasn't something that was pushed on me. But with friends and now being able to, if I was able to go with my friends, because coronavirus wasn't a thing, if I was able to go with my friends and wait in line and, vote, that would be awesome. I think that would be so much fun. We'd probably, bring snacks or something. I don't know. But I think making voting a habit and not just something like, oh, today I have to vote. But it's like, today I get to vote. Today I get to make my voice heard. I get to be a part of democracy. That's something that's crucial and really important. And I think one of the driving forces of why I do choose to vote and why I like voting. Yeah.
Well, that's a fantastic, I think, closing set of remarks there, Ashley. And I think that no, for real. I think that this notion of civic duty. There's so few prices we pay for citizenship in this country, right? We don't have mandatory national service. Sakane, you mentioned we don't have military service that's required, as many countries do. Why can't we make voting a duty? And as well as a right, right?
Many
Why can't we
countries
actually?
do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, I think we want to make sure that people can get out and get ready for the debate. Really, another critical way to engage with democracy is to be informed, hopefully informed.
Here for the food.
We'll see.
The mute
But-
button. There's a mute button, Hudson.
There is a mute button.
It
Yes.
gives me a headache, even with the mute button. It's like I don't want to hear them.
We'll see. But that said, we want to toss out some resources that you guys should really look towards. If you have additional questions, additional needs, need more information on what and to do and how to vote, of course, we want to have you aware of the fact that this is being sponsored by the 2020 Project. And, if you look at comments, vote-2020-project.org is a great place to start. There's also apiavote.org and also organizations like vote.org and iwillvote.com. For those who need in-language resources, voter guides, even party-specific voter guides, those are all available by state. They'll be mailed to you, but they're also available online. So please vote, but vote in an informed fashion, vote in a safe fashion, and vote early if you can.
Tell them why that's so important, Jeff.
Oh my gosh, because election day is not the end, guys. This is going to be, this is actually something really important.
Season.
Yes, this is election season. We're going to have people stop voting on the 3rd, but we're going to be counting ballots well into November, maybe
So
even
let's
December.
make a decision made early that we have all the votes we need right
Make a
on the-
plan. How are you going to
Thank you.
get there? Are you bringing snacks? What do you?
Right. Oh my God, we never talked about Asian snacks on the poll waiting line. Jesus.
I was
Make
sitting
your
there.
plan, guys.
Coffee.
Thank you guys all so
Waiting.
much for your
Guys,
fantastic
thank you, Ashley,
insights.
Hudson, Jeff.
Thank you so much, Sakina.
Guys.
Nice meeting you guys again.
Yes, thanks,
Yes.
Sakina.
Always had good on you.
After 4
Have
years,
fun
or
watching the
whatever.
debate, everybody.
6
It's
years?
going to be fun. It's going to be a good one.
All right.
Okay, bye.
All right.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.